Welcome to the Cannabis Review in 2021. It's the first show of the year, and I couldn't be starting off with a better guest to be joined by. We're going to be talking all things hemp, and I think there's no better man on the planet to be able to discuss things with. I'd like to introduce Geoff Whaling. How you doing, Geoff, today?
I'm very well, and welcome to 2021, and certainly it's a pleasure to speak to your audience today.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can bestow a bit of information into the audience here and help highlight a couple of topics that are going on at the moment. So I'd like to maybe, if you want to just basically start off and just introduce to everybody what position it is that you have and how you kind of got into the industry where you are at the moment.
Yeah, so I've taken a unique path, I guess, like many of us. I'm born in Canada, although I now am living in the United States and chair the National Hemp Association. I wrote the very first speech given by a minister of the federal cabinet on the decriminalization of marijuana way back in 1979. And certainly that started a discussion about cannabis reform in Canada. And although it was not part of my portfolio, the whole discussion 4 years later was about returning the hemp crop to the American land or to the Canadian landscape. And certainly we saw that happen. I saw the discussions, I saw the challenges that were confronted in Canada. And although I left government and then had a very successful career in motorsports and was a sports agent in IndyCar and NASCAR in North America, I had developed a relationship with actor Paul Newman. He and I did an awful lot of activities and had a business plan to introduce green racing to the North American marketplace. But as any of your audience might know, Paul Newman was a leader in trying to help children around the world. And when I retired from that, Paul was long dead, and I heard the story about young Charlotte Figge, who really became the face of the CBD movement in North America, if not around the planet. I reached out to her mother and said, how could I help you? Wanted to carry on Paul Newman's legacy. We got together, we formed one of the largest advocacy groups called the Coalition for Access Now, and started the process of passing legislation for access for CBD. I realized that we were not going to be able to pass that legislation in Congress. And I got involved with some national organizations. The National Hemp Association was one of them. I was asked to become the chair some 6 months later, and I realized that the approach that we were taking to pass legislation should not just be focused on 2% of the hemp crop, but to focus on hemp as a commodity. So we reconfigured our strategy. We looked at hemp as being more of a farming crop and the opportunity it could provide farmers as it can around the world. And certainly that is what allowed us for the first time ever to bring Senator Mitch McConnell, who leads the GOP in the Senate, and Chuck Schumer, who leads the opposition, together on one issue. It became a bipartisan issue. And certainly we are now full speed ahead in America to build that commodity crop, just like we're going to build soybean, or we've seen the build out of soybean and corn.
Amazing. I couldn't have a better person on to talk about the topic today. You've had a very successful career to date. I'll jump straight into the first topic that I wanted to bring up, and that's the Collective Growth Corp that you've set up. Would you like to explain to the audience what exactly that is and the ambitions and plans that you have for it?
Yeah, so I realized as a volunteer, for 5.5 years that, it was one thing to get legislation passed, but we had to acknowledge and recognize that, hemp had been absent in our landscape in North America for 85 years. I knew what had happened in Canada 30 years ago, that there was no infrastructure, there was no equipment, and certainly education was really going to be very important to get consumers and end users comfortable with talking about part of the cannabis plant. So we decided that not only would we get the legislation passed, I continued to be an advocate and a volunteer until the president signed this into law. I knew right away we needed to bring capital and investment to kind of address the supply chain issues. The reality is that this is not a chicken and egg issue. This is a scrambled egg issue. No manufacturer who is going to have large demands like the automotive industry is going to take on a hemp pilot program, or even research if they don't know at the end of that research if there's going to be a supply chain. There is no equipment in North America that can harvest a crop that has the potential of growing 21 feet tall, and that all parts of that crop have a revenue source, whether it be seed, fiber, the herd, and even the roots, and the leaves for CBD. So, how are we going to commercialize and bring this? So, I was the president of Canopy Growth's HIP developments, which was responsible for their hemp rollout. And certainly Bruce Linton, who is now my partner at Collective Growth, we decided that we would launch the first global public fund called Collective Growth, and raised $150 million from the very seat that I'm sitting in today. So I want to encourage the audience that all things are possible. So we raised that money and we went public on May the 1st of 2020. And then we started the process of looking at companies around the world that we could put together, all hemp companies initially, that we could put together under one umbrella, and then bring those companies to America to start that supply chain. The unfortunate reality is that given that we were a special purpose acquisition company that has very specific SEC rules, including that any company we would have to acquire would have to meet audit standards for a publicly traded company, and that we'd have to spend 80% of that $150 million, so $120 million making acquisitions. It wasn't going to be possible. So Bruce and I and our team kind of reevaluated where we were. We looked at 170 entities around the world, and we decided that maybe there's another roadway that we can take to help build out the hemp supply chain. And we have closed our first transaction with what most people might think is a bit of a detour, but we don't see it as that. We partnered with Magna International, which is one of the largest automotive tier 1 suppliers in the world, and with BMW, who many will know already incorporates sustainable fibers and hemp into the manufacturing of their i3 and i8. And together we have brought a company called Innovex Technology, which is an Israeli LiDAR technology company, to the public market. We hope that that deal, which is a $1.3 billion transaction, will close in Q1 of this year.
Okay, unbelievable. So you guys have gotten a lot done in the last while. I love hearing it. It's great to...
and again, from this very seat, which again tells me that all things are possible under COVID.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. There's opportunities there for those who are willing to seek them and to find them out. I'll jump straight into the second topic, and it's something I know you've got a good bit of knowledge and experience with, and it's the USDA Interim Final Rule on Industrial Hemp. Can you explain this as an overview to the audience who might not understand what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 2018 Hemp Agricultural Farming Act became part of the 2018 Agricultural Improvement Act. It was signed into law by the president on December the 22nd of 2018. And once that legislation became law, it allowed all federal agencies, including USDA, to start to look at policies and implement them as it related to the language in the legislation that would allow hemp to become a commodity crop. And the legislation gave USDA up to a year to develop rules. What I like to remind not only our members, but audiences around the world is that we have to remember that groups like the National Hemp Association and advocates have been working on hemp since 2013. The 2014 Farm Bill began the process to allow research of hemp, but it did not allow any U.S. federal agency from touching it. Only the 2018 Farm Bill allowed that. So we have 4 years worth of experience working with provinces and other organizations and states who undertook to start to research hemp. So USDA had to catch up. I can say that they did a masterful and Herculean lift to get interim final rules, the first phase of them, out within 8 months. But once we started to look at them and review them, they really did not reflect what was happening on the ground. And the relationship that we at the National Hemp Association have with USDA, they look at us as one of the most trusted voices as a nonpartisan group. when we said to them, we need to make some significant changes, they agreed to reopen the public comment period, and they did so last September. They closed it in October, and I know, and I'm happy to tell your audience, that those interim final rules are in the White House right now, the Office of Budget Management. Most of the issues that we have raised that reflect the reality on the ground are going to be in the new interim final rule. And the other thing that is important is that it also will change the date by which this interim final rule will become a final rule to January 31st of 2022.
Okay, excellent. That's definitely given a depth of information to that topic, and thank you very much for that. The third episode or third topic that I'm going to bring it back to, and this is, I've got a couple of topics for this. It's the future of the global hemp industry. Do you see a situation where there's a synergistic gathering of all the different farmers across Europe and they trade as a block together? Or do you see it being more fragmented in the future? How do you see the global hemp industry playing out? Do you see more farmers going for growing it for different sources apart from CBD because the price is bottoming it out? Or what are your thoughts on those two kind of avenues for the global hemp industry?
I know it's an issue that's near and dear to your heart, but I have to say that CBD has been the bane of my existence as the chair of the National Hemp Association. It is what most people, most consumers, most politicians think hemp is. And as you and I and many of your audience members who are interested in this crop will know, is that CBD only represents 2% of the potential of this crop. And so what I've realized is here in America, we've had a lot of investment, but we've also had a lot of failures, big failures, and the farmers have been left on the wayside. And so I need to go back in and start to rebuild trust. So that we will be able to embrace a large commodity and large scale farming groups to look at hemp. But the combination of what I know from a practicality, from what's happened on the ground, what's happened over the last year, certainly from Collective Growth's perspective, if I look at all of those components, what I realize is that we need to be able to put that scrambled egg together. We need to be able to demonstrate to farmers that there is a market. They're never going to grow this crop unless that they know that there's a place for them to sell it, and they're not going to be end users unless they know that there is a whole supply chain, as I said earlier. And the path that we took at Collective Growth to build the supply chain isn't going to work from our financial instruments perspective. It might work for others. So Bruce and I, we're not giving up. We're certainly not abandoning hemp. We're going to approach this differently. And we might look at our business model that will be food to pharma and then sustainable industrial disruption, and look at what industries are out there already existing that are already successful, that have the relationships with the end users that we can acquire and then bolt hemp onto or introduce them, so that we can slowly start to convert farmers who are already supplying commodity companies and others with an opportunity to switch over a portion of their acreage onto growing hemp as a commodity crop. And I think that's the path that should be taken globally. The opportunities are huge. What we have taken 5 years to accomplish in the United States, including just having the USDA announce a $150 million research opportunity, grants of up to $10 million to help build out and research the hemp supply chain. That's what we're going to need to do over the next 4 or 5 years, which is what I see as us being in that research phase. People will start to take it on. We will certainly need to realize here in the United States, as well as around the world, which varieties grow best and what could they be used for, whether it be supplying the textile industry or the automotive industry, or be a replacement for bioplastics. Or energy, or feed for humans and food for animals, and oils. All of those things I think need to be researched. And we also need to go through the process of creating standards. Although hempcrete is a very popular issue right now, I think that we would all be smart, and certainly NHA is going to be leading this, and researching as part of what we hope will be a successful NIFA grant, to look at the supply chain of growing hemp, harvesting it, decorticating it, processing it to supply the construction industry. And as part of that will be, what are the standards in order to use hemp that can be approved for building? If the standards don't exist, we have to go through that entire process. And that's the same for animal feed and other products that we know that hemp can supply. So slow and steady is the name of the game. I know I speak to a lot of events around the world. I usually leave people with the thought that the next 5 years will be under research. 10 years from now, hemp will be everywhere if we do this right and boldly. And 20 years from now, when I'm long dead, people will say, well, what was the big deal? Because hemp will be with us everywhere.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I think CBD is the entry point for a lot of people who knew nothing about the plant, but the abilities and the inventions and innovation that's going to come from this, I think we're going to see over the next couple of decades to come. I often think that there's a number of young entrepreneurs and innovators out there who are only coming into their business ideas now, who will be thinking along the lines of hemp as one of the components for themselves to be successful in this world.
Oh, listen, I am amazed every single day by, it's one of those things, when we started this process, my colleague, Erica McBride Stark, who is the executive director of the National Hemp Association and one of the great resources of our industry, when we started this, there was a small group of people and we kind of formalized the organizations and we took this approach. I was on a call yesterday with probably 20 different divisions of Penn State University, with people representing Hyundai, with entrepreneurs and others. And I kind of reflected on the fact that this is what we've worked so hard for. Although it's difficult to let this go, it's like producing a child and seeing your child off to university. You need to let it go. The things that I see are coming out of, and proudly so, seeing coming out of universities and young students is amazing. They're not developing technologies that are good for tomorrow. They're thinking about things that are 10 and 15 years from now. There's a product out in the market right now that is called Hemp Black. It is a textile that's being developed by Jefferson University in Pennsylvania and their research team. And it uses the the properties of hemp to capture the energy from your body. And there is a diode that will be woven into the fabric that will allow you to read your biometrics. It's washable, it's usable. And, they even talk about the fact that they might be able to change the look of that textile, all using the energy that's come from the sun and absorbed from your body. And I'm like, what? And then they said to me, oh, Geoff, you know what? There might be the possibility of us being able to make artificial arteries with hemp. Who knew?
Wow. Okay, yeah. I think we could have been ending on a better topic like that. The outlier that is, the industry is very positive for the hemp industry, all going according to plan with innovation kicking in. I can't thank you enough, Geoff, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, a man with a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, well, listen, it's my pleasure. The work that you do to educate is by far more important than what I do every single day. So please pass on the good word.
Yeah, no, I much appreciate that. So thank you very much for coming on. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you with the next episode.